I'm Scott Hansen, host of NFL Red Zone. Lowe's knows Sundays hit different when you earn them. We've got you covered with outdoor power equipment from Cobalt and everything you need to weatherproof your deck with Trex decking. Plus, with lawn care from Scott's and, of course, Pit Boss grills and accessories, you can get a home field advantage all season long. So get to Lowe's, get it done, and earn your Sunday. Lowe's, official partner of the NFL.
When it comes to delivering flowers for life's special occasions, trust the name that's been setting the standard for nearly 50 years. 1-800-Flowers.com. From breathtaking bouquets to one-of-a-kind arrangements, 1-800-Flowers is your authority on quality blooms. Always fresh, always stunning, always delivered with care. And right now, for a limited time, you can save up to 40% off your bouquet and make someone's day. Save up to 40% off today at 1-800-Flowers.com/SXM. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/SXM.
This Choircast podcast is brought to you by Pelakiankwe, processing liberation through an Indigenous American lens. Hi, I'm Ryan, and my new book, Pelakiankwe, Processing Liberation Through an Indigenous American Lens, is a road trip story like no other. Through conversations with Native voices, I explore what liberation looks like from an Indigenous perspective, through history, theology, and lived experience. It's real, and it's an invitation to listen, question, and journey toward something deeper. Available April 8th from Choir Publishing.
The majority of our life is lived in liminal space.
And there's this in-between space, this liminal space.
This liminality that reveals possibility.
I think we're in a liminal moment, but also in a place of transformation. We could actually change as a people.
I have great affection for the church and a troubled relationship with it.
That can't be the gospel because God said to love our neighbors.
Just to be alive in time means that we're on the threshold of the future.
Just to begin questioning is so difficult, because you have these voices in your ears telling you that you're not a real Christian.
We don't know what the future looks like. We have to work it out together.
All right, this is part 2 of 2. So if you did not listen to part 1 and we just jump right into the deep end and you're not sure what's going on, maybe you pause this one, go back to next week's and listen to part 1 first, and then come back to this one. But if you already listened to part 1 and you've been anticipating part 2, this is the day you get to hear where Matt Tebbe goes with this next piece. And it's pretty awesome. We get a little practical. I hope you enjoy it. And yeah, I'm just going to shut up now and let you watch.
Can I go on like a 2-minute rant about this?
Please do.
You mentioned the medieval sort of mechanical, like machine god, like all that. I think they're actually, you referenced that earlier. I'm just calling that back into the conversation now. I think there actually was I think the Enlightenment, modernity, scientism, rationalism, romanticism, like all these isms that came to compete with religion about the ability to make truth claims on the world. I think religion, in particular Christianity, made Enlightenment deals.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So the Enlightenment then claimed the physical, material, tangible, pecuniary world. Like real world stuff is the stuff of science, economics, right? Architecture, right? You don't need God for that. So God, over many, many years, in varying degrees, retreated out of the material world into an immaterial, personal, private, abstract, personal experience.
Yep.
So no longer did God speak to how we organize as a community or what our resources were for. No longer do we consider money spiritual. Now money was aspiritual, and what mattered was how much you loved it inside your heart, i.e. internal abstract ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So then like usury or debt was a spiritual condition that was seen as sub-Christian. But the concern about money went from yeah, we shouldn't charge interest to brothers and sisters in Christ. That's wrong. No. Money's now economics, banking, markets. Religion doesn't have any claims on that. The religious claim on money now is, Tom, and you've heard this before, you can have as much money as you can possibly get as long as you don't love it more than God.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Except, Jesus fails to mention that when he talks about money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right?
Yep.
And so what happens then, I think, is that we Christians evacuated the real world and retreated into ideas, abstractions, internalities, so that we can even in my language, we can talk about the material world and the spiritual world, and we think of those as two different realities.
Yeah.
But in Jesus' day, that wasn't the case. The material was spiritual. It was all spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of the way that capitalism has got us in a trance, a stupor, is that it reinforces this bifurcation between, quote, the real world and our spiritual life.
Yes.
And we evacuate most of what actually matters in our life and don't see it as actually spiritual grounds.
Yeah.
So then, debt relief, this was the straw that broke the camel's back in my old denomination. I don't know if I've told this story to you on this podcast before, but Joe Biden proposed student debt relief like in, what was it, 2022 or 23? I can't remember what, 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, Christians were apoplectic about it.
Yes.
Losing their minds. And I just put out on Facebook like, hey, there is this consistent, well-articulated celebration of debt relief all through Scripture. Let me share a couple of those things with you and why debt is a spiritually harmful condition and why as Christians we should celebrate people getting out of debt. And I got a call from the person who was over me ecclesially and told not to post any more on social media.
On your personal social media page?
Yeah, my personal social media page.
Wow.
Because it was so offensive to him and the people he was receiving phone calls from throughout my denomination. At the same time, Christianity Today wanted to publish it. Now they published it sandwiched in between like a Cato Institute commentary on it, which is a very conservative think tank that was anti-debt relief, and then somebody else who basically was anti-debt relief. So I was like the dissenting Christian voice in this, here's 3 takes on debt relief.
Mm-hmm.
But I had this really awkward position of like having to ask permission to retweet it, my first publication in Christianity Today from somebody who told me to stop writing.
Wow.
I just bring that up. I bring that up as an illustration to your point to say like, there's no. I don't know how to articulate, Tom, the kind of stupor that we are in, that capitalism has put us in, a trance where we can't, where we don't go, is there ever a celebration of debt? Does God ever celebrate somebody getting in debt? And then does God ever get mad of releasing debts? Does he ever get mad? Does God ever say, well, it was your fault. Your fault you got in debt. You took out that bad loan, and you took that bad job, and then you bought a PS4. And so your punishment is to languish in... No. And so, like, the fact that isn't compelling...
Yeah.
Right? Or persuasive indicates, I think, the hold on us that capitalism has.
Yeah. It's like we've created two worlds of dogmatics. One are the ideas about the faith that you're not allowed to question, and one is like then the material world. You're not allowed to question the dogmatics of how the material world operates in wealth and capitalism and all that.
Yes.
And I experienced that when I do a funeral. I do about 30 funerals a year because I'm good at them. I talk about grief and what to do with it. I don't get overly spiritual. I don't offer a bunch of scriptures and prayers and sermons. I hit head on the problem of grief, what it's going to look like, how you can handle it, what it'll feel like. I get very practical in my sermons about how to handle the grief that's coming your way. We celebrate their life. If they were religious, we include whatever scriptures were important to them, but I always talk about grief. And I was specifically asked to do a non-religious service and said, if you mention Bible or anything, people will walk out because they will be upset, so please don't. And I was fine. I said, I'm going to say the same thing anyway, so I talked about grief. And there was a fundamentalist pastor in the audience, and he called me the next Monday, chewed me out for peddling, some kind of a, what do you call it, humanism? And I was like, well, we are humans. It's okay to talk about being human and what grief's going to do. He's like, well, you gave them no eternal significance at all in any of your message. You didn't pray. You didn't offer scriptures. You didn't tell them about salvation or preach the gospel. And that you could see, like, the strict lines, how we've separated the ideas, almost like we have to create a conspiracy theory that we call the faith, and everyone has to then come in and believe all these ideas about what God is like and what the metaphysical world is like.
Yeah.
And then we have to maintain the conspiracy, and we get mad when people poke holes in the conspiracy. And our whole communities are built around this conspiracy, and there's just no way to be human inside of that. And then I just come in and talk about grief, and it poked a hole, and boy, he got mad. Real mad.
Yeah. Yeah. Circling back to, like, the Charlie Kirk funeral, which is taking place recently when we're recording. I've seen some people who want to critique sort of the Christian nationalism that's taking place at the funeral, but they preface their critique with, I was really excited to hear so-and-so's clear presentation of the gospel.
Yes, I hear that too.
Yeah. Like, I didn't watch it, I won't watch it, but apparently one of the people I am friends with on social media was giving kudos to Marco Rubio for giving a clear presentation of the gospel. And there's something about that is so fascinating to me. Like, first of all, that we feel the need to, like, give, like, credit that, you know, like, it just indicates, it indicates to me that there's some kind of anxiety running that, where you can't just critique the Christian nationalism. You have to give credit where credit is due. But that only exists in certain arenas. Nobody's giving credit to, nobody's commenting on a crime, but giving credit to a criminal about how good of lawn care they provided at their house. Or they committed this crime, but they served at a soup kitchen every week. Like, no one feels the need to affirm the good parts of a criminal's life when talking about a criminal, like we do when we're talking about, clear Christian idolatry. But then we have to give credit where credit is due, that they shared, quote, the gospel. That's the first thing. The second thing, like, sharing the gospel, which is probably some kind of... When I hear that, Tom, I don't know if you think of this too, I think of, like, oh, they're probably just talking about sort of the Jesus died for your sins, and if you believe in him, you'll go to heaven.
Yeah.
Right? Something like that. Like that.
Standard substitutionary atonement theories.
Yeah, Romans Road or whatever, the bridge illustration in verbal form, something like that. That is, first of all, I mean, that is the gospel, you know? That is something, that them sharing something that Jesus never shares is concomitant with the gospel.
Yeah.
Them sharing something that is maybe a synthesis or summary of certain articulations in the New Testament about the significance of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. Maybe you could say that. But the fact that we can say they're sharing the gospel inside of an idolatrous system, and there's no indication that the idolatry of Christian nationalism compromises the gospel message. Like, it's just fascinating to me, Tom.
Yeah. The dichotomy that exists within that. And your average person is not going to know how to call into question that presentation of the gospel in relation to the uncomfortable feelings they might feel in a Christian nationalist idolatrous display. They're not going to have, I guess, the savvy to be able to theologically parse the lines and say, well, certainly, that can't be a presentation of the gospel in this system and form. They're not going to have that. So I think that what you do online is very helpful for people who don't know how to articulate the vibes they got going on. They're like, I can't put the words on how uncomfortable I feel or why, because I'm supposed to embrace these ideas and these concepts and these values I was taught to, but there's something that just doesn't sit well with me. And so, I got to give props to so-and-so for saying the truth or preaching the gospel. And
I wonder if it's, permit me to think out loud here for a bit. I know we're going long, Tom, and
I have time if you do. So you help me know when to cut it off.
We talked a little bit about how the weaponization of free speech actually threatens free speech.
Yeah.
Just like the weaponization of freedom of religion is actually the biggest threat to religious freedom.
Yes. Yeah.
So Christian supremacy in the wrapped in sort of the cloak of religious freedom is the biggest threat to our religious freedom because of the way the backlash it will engender.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because it's not really religious freedom, you want to deport Muslims, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And it's barely veiled code words of just anti-Islamophobia. But two, it's not freedom you want, it's supremacy.
That's the distinction right there.
It's not freedom you want, it's supremacy. I've got a book on my shelf. I haven't read it yet. And every time I talk about this, I think, I need to read this book. But it's a book about how the word liberty and freedom from the very beginning of our country have been loaded words doing very variegated work. So, meaning life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, what does that mean? What does liberty mean there in that phrase? Right? Well, they're borrowing it from John Locke, life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. Life, liberty, and property. And so, once you do some digging about what was compelling about that phrase, what was meant by that phrase, what work was that phrase doing, it's maybe liberty isn't the best word for that. Maybe liberty, and like we were talking earlier about how Charlie Kirk is held up as a paragon of free speech. But he sort of weaponized free speech. You know?
Yeah, I can see that.
And those who are criticizing Charlie Kirk are finding out really quick that those who value Charlie Kirk don't value their freedom of speech. Right?
Freedom and supremacy are two
Yes.
different things. The freedom
Yeah.
to be supreme is what it is.
Yes. Yes.
The freedom to then dominate, the freedom to be the ones in charge, to then be
Yes.
able to dictate what other freedoms people are allowed to engage in.
Yes.
There's a let me say something real quick. There's a benevolent side to that I see. Like, white people, a lot of white conservatives want to be supreme. They want to have the money, the power, the positions in order to be benevolent with it to people who need it. They like the feeling it gives them of, I want to win the lottery so that I can, do all this stuff. I want to pay off someone's mortgage, or, they want to be like a reality TV show or whatever. They want to have the freedom of supremacy in order to feel good about the supremacy by doing acts of benevolence instead of embracing societal change that brings benevolence to the mass amount of people. That's a distinction I'm seeing in a lot of these conservative white groups where they really want all the power, all the money, all the whatever, so that they can do some good things here and there and then feel okay about it. They really like the way it makes them feel.
Yeah.
And then it kind of cloaks that supremacy in this false benevolence or false generosity. And it's like, well, you're not generous now, so you probably won't be generous when you cash in and get your dream.
Yes.
Kind of a thing. So it's almost like a false generosity or false benevolence that cloaks over that supremacy language. I've noticed that quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I would say it goes beyond white conservatives, though. Like, many white progressives are in that sort of elite and white moderates. So white moderates and white progressives and white conservatives, there may be overlapping circles there, but we use those words colloquially to describe three kind of white postures in the world. And I see that sort of that supremacist benevolence in all over, right? And I think learning from black people about, the hazard of having a white progressive friend, or a white moderate friend, is that that's baked into whiteness. That's part of the whiteness package, is wanting to have control of the resources and be seen as the good guy for how charitable and generous and wonderful you are, as long as I get to choose how to spend.
Freedom.
Where it goes.
Yep.
As long as I'm in control.
Yeah.
And that's not something I like. For me, it's not something I have to choose. Oh yes, I want to be in control. It's just like baked into being white.
Yeah.
It's baked in. So anyway, I see that in all white people, I think. Yeah. And the fear of not being in control, Tom, is huge.
I'll recognize that one right in myself.
Well, yeah. I think it's a human fear to not have self-determination, to be at the mercy of someone else, to not have agency or say-so in what matters to you. Like that, and to some extent, like, that's part of what it means to be made in the image of God, is that our choices matter, what we want matters, that we have agency to move out in the world, to create or to build or to boundary. Like, those things are actually like part of what it means to be human. But the desire then to use unrighteous means to secure control over other people is kind of where it's not okay.
Yes.
Yes. Where it's not okay, Yeah. And I know there's fuzzy lines here.
There's a lot of fuzzy lines.
There's so many fuzzy lines here, but
as you said, everything is connected. Everything in a globalized society, everything seems to be all connected, and we're not sure. Just all the ways that we're involved in the world are connected to other things, oppressive forces that we just will never know about and we don't see, let alone the things that we do see that we don't want to see and just kind of turn a blind eye to. So I guess last question. It's the water we swim in. It's hard to identify the water we swim in.
Mm-hmm.
So if there are some folks listening that really want to start labeling things, the systemic ways that, say, capitalism, mammon, political ideology has shaped their understanding of God in incorrect ways, do you have any practices or resources that you could direct people towards that can help them start to maybe name the things that need to be named and start to act differently, reimagine God for this modern world?
Yeah. I mean, I'm assembling a reading list for this stuff. And maybe I can share that with you, Tom, and you can share it with your listeners.
Sure thing.
But it's more than a reading list. I think, again, mammon worship or mammon idolatry or the regnancy of mammon, the kingdom of mammon, isn't something that needs my consent. I mean, I don't have to be conscious, aware, consenting, intending to worship mammon because my entire culture is set up for me to worship mammon and not know it. So getting used to that, like getting used to the fact that I am caught up and I'm caught up and implicated in a system that doesn't need my personal volitional intention in order to compromise me. That can be really hard for those of us who grew up in philosophical or cultural milieus like ours in the West, where free will, individualism, expressionism is king.
Yeah.
Right? Where I'm only culpable and guilty if I intended harm.
Yep.
Or I'm only culpable and guilty if I knew it was wrong. Like, these are just assumptions in our culture that aren't assumptions in other cultures, by the way. Like anthropologists and sociologists who research certain Middle Eastern cultures, they did this study, real quick, this is a nerdy thing, did a study where two Westerners come to a table and they both have the same briefcase. And the person who's in charge of the study intentionally grabs the other briefcase, the wrong one, and leaves with it. And then later comes back and tells the person, I'm sorry, our briefcases looked exactly the same. I took yours on accident. And almost 100% of the time, the Westerner who doesn't understand that it's a study, who this is like, just happening to them, is like, oh, no problem. Completely understandable how that could happen, right? But when they do this study in non-Western, non-white cultures, it's a much different story. It doesn't matter if it was a mistake that is understandable. There is an expectation, a cultural expectation, that you will provide some restitution and reparation for the wrong you've done, even if you didn't intend to do it. So
that's fascinating.
It is fascinating. I just point that out as an artifact of that is a culturally conditioned way of being in the world that seems obvious to us, self-evident, right? Just seems objective. Well, of course it's not morally right to hold Tom accountable for mistakenly grabbing my briefcase when it looks just like his.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not obvious to other cultures. Now, I'm not saying which one is superior or right. That's not my point of bringing that up. My point of bringing that up is we live and move and have our being in mammon, and it doesn't need your awareness or consent or intent for you to operate according to its logic.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time for many of us to just accept that.
Just that foundational idea.
Just that idea, Tom. It's like people have all kinds of defense mechanisms when I say that. Like, well, you have a better idea of how to run our economy? You can't be this is the best economy the world's ever seen. I mean, people just go, look, I'm not even telling you, I'm not even proposing an alternative political economy. What I'm saying is our political economy is contrasting with and conflicting with the kingdom of God in many, many ways, and we have to wake up to that.
Yeah.
We have to wake up to that, right? And this also, I mentioned purity culture earlier, Tom. Like, we want to be pure. We don't like moral complexity. So, for instance, like, I mentioned like my money in my bank and my bank spending that money in ways I can't control. We like things to be much more morally simple than that. My agency stops with, what I choose to do with my time. If I'm not punching a child, I'm not harming them. Like we don't like the moral complexity of money is an extension of my agency. And when I give my agency over to someone else and they use my agency or my capital, or maybe we could call it they use some of my power for nefarious purposes, how do we reckon with my connection to that? How do we name to what degree and how am I responsible for that? We don't have good language, right, Tom? We don't have good language for that.
Yeah. We don't even,
I'm trying to name it because we don't talk about it usually, meaning in my circles, and maybe in other circles. But because we don't like things to be that morally complicated. And then we just basically are like, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to move on to like a federally protected land and sell all I have and live, off the grid and not have money at all and not be in debt at all? And so then we go to this like extreme place, and then we throw up our hands and say, what you're saying is unlivable.
We're taking a quick break here mid-show to let you know of an opportunity that Choir is offering. Are you deconstructing your faith? It's tough, believe me, I know, I've done it. But what if you didn't have to do it alone? Imagine having guides like Jim Palmer, Kristen Dumais, Jennifer Knapp, Brad Jerzak, Brian Zahn, Paul Young, and more by your side to help. I know I would have loved that on my journey. Well, now you can. Head on over to choiracademy.com, link will be in the show notes, and register for their Square 2 class using the promo code LIMINAL, and you will get 10% off. This course and community are designed to help you navigate your journey with wisdom and support, all because you're a fan of the Liminal Living podcast. Ministry leaders, how do you heal from the burnout, loneliness, and the relentless weight of leadership? Kaneo Center exists for you. For 5 years, Kaneo has walked with over 500 ministry leaders through their darkest seasons, offering a rare blend of compassionate coaching, therapeutically informed practices, and Jesus-centered renewal. Kaneo is launching new 24-week cohorts now, where you'll join a small group of leaders for weekly video coaching, guided curriculum, and reflections to rebuild your resilience. The cohort all ends with a retreat in Puerto Rico. As a Kaneo coach myself, I've seen how this space transforms lives. And for Liminal Living listeners, mention Liminal in your application at thecaneocenter.com/cohort to claim $100 off your cohort experience. You've poured into others, let Kaneo pour into you. If you're in a dark night or deconstruction, you know how vital it is to ground yourself in intentional practice. That's why I'm thrilled to partner with the Monk Manual, a journaling system inspired by monastic wisdom and backed by science. The Monk Manual is a daily journal companion for reflection, purpose, and aligning your actions with your deepest values. Whether you're rebuilding after deconstruction or seeking clarity in transition, this tool turns liminality into grounded growth. And now, Liminal Living listeners can save 10% on their Monk Manual using the code LIMINAL over at monkmanual.com/liminal. And remember, the wisdom of liminal spaces lies in how we journey through them. So do it with intention. And now back to our show.
And I just want to encourage listeners, acknowledge that extreme place, acknowledge that frustration that we are like just tied into this system that is dehumanizing, and that it compromises us. It compromises us in many ways, and we participate in the compromising of others in many ways. So we're all victims and we're all villains to varying degrees. And just get used to that.
Mm-hmm.
Get used to it.
Yeah.
It's hard for me as a white pastor to not feel like I'm just the good guy. I'm a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, I'm a good guy. And that ego, whatever you want to call it, that ego or that story or that unwillingness to feel morally, have moral complexity that I don't know how to extricate myself from. Part of it is just learning to abide, learning to make space for that, learning to just say, yeah, this thing is hegemonic. It's huge. It's systematic. It is part of every. It makes claims on our time. It makes claims. What are people for? It makes claims on our attention. What am I giving my attention to? It makes claims on all these things that are religious claims. And I can't see most of it. And I've got to get over the despair and anger and anxiety of that so I can do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's not like, that is so not a marketable first step.
That is not very practical. But you have to get at the foundation that we're standing on if you want to take another step.
There's a paradigm shift, yeah.
Yeah, you got to shift the entire paradigm. And you're not proposing a solution of like, well, instead of banking in this way, you can try banking in this more morally. We might not have a more moral, ethical option for banking, but acknowledging I'm a part of this system is getting out of that individualism, spiritual lens of things and saying, I'm a part of this thing.
Can I give you an example of just two quick examples?
Sure.
If your listeners want practical things, these aren't prescriptions. These are, and I like talking about experiments. Like running experiments to transgress the doctrine of mammon. Become unholy transgressors of mammon. One of them is our church had its banking at one of the big banks like Chase or Bank of America, one of those big ones. And we just felt like something we could do is pull our money out of this multi-billion-dollar national corporation that's, really when you look into what banks are doing around the world, it's just not pretty. Exploiting the poor, all kinds of awful things. And so we did research on a local bank, and because in my town, Indianapolis, the banking industry was dominated by white people because of racism and white supremacy for a long time. And there have, in the last 20 or 30 or 40 years, been some black-owned banks started. We decided to put our money in a black-owned bank, a local, independent, black-owned bank that, one of the enduring impacts of racism is wealth inequality. And so we're like, yeah, let's and there was more to it, Tom, right? We did research on this bank, and and we're losing some features now, Tom. We're losing some convenience. We're losing some efficiency, right? It's going to take us a few more minutes every time we want to pay a bill. right? But we felt like it was a righteous move. Well, we did it. It's hard to take $100,000 out of a bank. They don't want you to do it, so it took a long time for us to get that.
Oh, yeah.
You know. And then several months ago, the bank we put our money in was the subject of a newspaper article. We still have those in my town about they were not lending money to black homeowners. They weren't issuing mortgages or giving home improvement loans to black prospective homeowners and homeowners because they were a greater liability. They had deemed them a greater liability and risk than white people. They were called on it, and they, promised to do better. Does that make our experiment, wrong, bad, ineffective? I felt discouraged when I heard that, No. Going back to the first thing I said, it's not like black banks are good, white banks are bad. It's not like independent banks are good and multinational, multi-corporational banks are bad. There are layers of moral complexity, and we are running experiments on how to transgress mammon, and every experiment we run, we learn something new. And we become less of a disciple of mammon and more a disciple of Jesus. So, second example. And that story's ongoing. Who knows if we'll stay with that bank? Who knows? But I feel good that we moved out in faith and are gaining wisdom as we move in faith. The second is that a group of people who live in a neighborhood together had a preponderance of them had stay-at-home moms or moms with young kids. And one of the things they kept talking about in their small group is that they felt like they didn't have time to do self-care, mental health things, participate in neighborhood events because of the tyranny of small kids under the age of 5 and cooking dinner every night. It was just this tyranny every day, right? Tyranny meaning just, there's just no me time. So they decided they were going to begin this meal sharing co-op. So there's 4 families who alternate cooking meals for every family once a week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That means the Crawfords only cook one night a week, but they cook for 4 families. And they deliver the food. And then the other 3 nights of the weekday nights, right, they don't have to cook. The meal gets delivered to them. They reclaim some time. And they realized it takes me basically the same amount of time to cook for 5 people as it does to cook for 20. It's minimal, and I reclaim a bunch of time, and I feel like I got margin and space. And so reclaiming that time as holy undoes some of how capitalism demands, this is a whole different conversation, capitalism demands a nuclear family. The nuclear family is a fetish within capitalism. Now, I have a nuclear family. There's nothing inherently wrong, but inside of sort of the kingdom of mammon, nuclear families become isolating and almost impossible units to satisfy our belonging and security and significant needs we have as humans. And there's a direct line to the breaking up of larger social bands, units, clans, structures, and isolated nuclear families living by themselves, and the rise of the way that mammon presents itself today in modern capitalism. So it's like this little experiment to undo some of the limitations of what they were feeling that the demands of a nuclear family were placing on them. And it's been going on for 2 years.
Oh, wow. 2 years.
And they love it. Now, neither of those things are like, quote, spiritual disciplines, right?
Yeah.
So like creativity and courage and resiliency and expecting to fail and starting again, like all of that's necessary to dismantle the tyrant of mammon. No silver bullet, no single shot. So those are two examples of how people in my life and our church is trying to respond to, what if we said no to the doctrine of mammon? What would we do different? Let's run this experiment and see what happens. And I think I would just commend that to your audience, Tom. Like, there's a whole another podcast of like the ways that mammon works in our lives. But yeah, the freedom to just start small, run an experiment, see what happens, recalibrate, try again.
Yeah. That is something that I think we could do. I don't like your term of experiment. It's like, we haven't found gospel truth of how we're going to do this. We're just going to try something.
We're not prescribing this to everybody.
Yeah.
Right?
This is not what all people should do for all time.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I so much appreciate you carving out. Gosh, we've been talking for over 90 minutes, and it's so rich. It's so good. I feel like I have a lot of things to process. I always learn so much when I read from you or talk to you just about naming the systemic things that are around us, the water we're swimming in that feels nebulous and oppressive. And I just really appreciate your keen abilities to look into those systems and name things in helpful ways. They're not threatening. They're just helpful to name it and say, this is something that I see in operation. We could change it in this way. It's just so helpful, and I just appreciate your time so much for just talking with me. And gosh, I'm learning. I'm still thinking about everything, so my brain is, the gears are turning. But I appreciate you and your voice, and I hope that you write that book.
Yeah. Thanks. You could pray that I would. I'm intimidated. I'm really intimidated to write it.
Yeah, it's intimidating.
And I feel like I don't. I mean, I'm fine like getting out over my skis on a podcast, right? Like saying something. I may listen to this and be like, "Oh gosh, that's wrong. I don't know why I said that." Or somebody might fact check something I said. I'm like, "Yeah, it's totally." But that was, But so for me, it's like not as threatening to like just be talking to you and say something wrong or misguided or even unintentionally harmful. Like that is less threatening to me than like trying to write a book about something that feels so big, and writing it in a way that's helpful and readable and like, so yeah, pray for courage and that I could marshal the discipline to do it.
Yeah. The courage already exists because you already do it. And I pray for the extension of that courage into this next sphere.
Thanks, brother.
Well, thanks for coming on and talking with me.
It's been a pleasure.
Hey, thanks for tuning in for part 1 and part 2 of this episode. Again, if you listen to this one and you felt a little lost, maybe you missed the little intro, but we have part 1 is last week. So go tune into that one. I want to listen to this one about 3 or 4 times myself, just because Matt Tebbe is so rich in his mind. You can see it working. It's great. But thank you for joining us for part 1 and part 2 of this awesome Reimagining God series I'm doing. And we'll see you next week with Anthony Smith.